Hello and welcome to Eye on Africa here on France 24. I'm Fraser Jackson. Your headlines this evening. US Treasury Secretary is in Senegal as she begins a three-country tour. Washington is looking to woo African nations as it eyeballs Russian influence in Africa. This January, Ivory Coast has given the country's minimum wage a significant boost. The new limit aims to ease the pain on people's wallets caused by fluctuating prices. We'll have a report from our team on the ground. And a journalist critical of the government in Rwanda has died. Police say he was killed in a car crash, but some human rights activists are questioning the official version of events. It's good to have you with us this evening. Our top story, the US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen is in Senegal as Washington continues its charm offensive in Africa. Concerned about the growing influence of Russia on the continent, the US is working hard to woo African nations and build better ties. Russia's war in Ukraine has had an impact on import prices across Africa, including that of oil. Yellen used her visit to claim African countries could save around $6 billion annually through a price cap on Russian oil spearheaded by the G7 and Australia. Cami Nedelec has the story.
Touting the continent's enormous economic potential, US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen kicked off her 10-day trip to Africa on Friday. It's Washington's latest attempt to extend its sphere of influence in the region in the wake of the war in Ukraine.
Russia's barbaric aggression against its neighbor is particularly being felt by Africa and its people. Russia's war and weaponization of food has exacerbated food insecurity and caused untold suffering. And the global economic headwinds caused by the actions of a single man, President Putin.
It's the first high-profile visit of a senior US official this year, but by no means the last, with the President, Vice President Kamala Harris and other cabinet secretaries expected to visit the continent in 2023. In December, President Joe Biden hosted the US-Africa Leaders Summit, the first since 2014, where he announced that the US would commit $55 billion to the continent over the next 3 years. But even as the US tries to get African countries on side, on Thursday, Mali's position was clear. Its latest shipment of warplanes and helicopters from Russia arrived in Bamako, following similar deliveries in March and August last year.
Ensuring the security of the Malian population is not a luxury, but a necessity.
As Mali's relationship with Paris and the West soured, the junta has increasingly turned to the Kremlin to fight the country's growing jihadist insurgency.
Some news just coming into us here at France 24. Burkina Faso's national broadcaster has said 66 women and children kidnapped last week have been freed by an army operation. France 24's correspondent in the country is telling us they were freed in the village of Tuguri. The group was kidnapped by suspected jihadists as they picked fruit. Burkina Faso has been grappling with an insurgency in the north for years. Tens of thousands have been killed by jihadist violence, and around 2 million people have been displaced. Next, Sierra Leone has passed into law a landmark bill which hopes to reduce the gender gap in the country. Described as groundbreaking, the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment Act dictates that women must now make up at least 30% of positions in private and public sector companies. The 30% rule also applies to management roles to stop companies from filling lower-level jobs with women to comply to the new law. It also applies to the country's parliament, where just 12% of members are female. The bill is believed to be the first of its kind in sub-Saharan Africa. Ivory Coast now has a new minimum wage. On the 1st of January, Ivorians' wages jumped from 60,000 West African francs per month to 75,000. That's a hike from around 91 euros to 115 euros. It's a measure that is aimed at supporting workers who have suffered from price fluctuations due to the COVID pandemic and also the war in Ukraine. Sophie Lamotte has the story.
Zainab Darasuba works in the Adjamé market in Abidjan. She earns minimum wage and has recently had a 15,000 CFA franc raise from the government. That's just under 23 euros. Zainab has 2 children and says the increase won't go far.
It doesn't cover the electricity and water bills, because I'm a single mother. I pay 60,000 francs for my house, around 90 euros. Working here allows me to do some shopping before I go home. It's difficult to make ends meet, but I deal with it.
As the country grapples with the cost of living crisis, Zainab, like many Ivorians, thinks the new raise to the minimum wage is too little too late.
The concern is that when the 15,000 francs are added, everything will go towards paying taxes. And with the high cost of living, anyone who hopes to have these 15,000 francs added to their salary will still find themselves at the bottom of the ladder.
It's not easy. There are too many expenses. You have to pay the electricity bill, the water, and all that. Frankly, it's difficult. So if there was a bigger increase, it would be a relief for every Ivorian.
Less than 4% of the Ivorian population is affected by the small increase to the minimum wage. This economist says the step is a little one, but on the right track.
The minimum wage rose from around 36,500 francs before 2013 to 60,000 in 2013. Then again to 75,000 francs in 2023. That's an increase of 100% in 10 years, which is huge.
The latest increase kicked in on January the 1st against the backdrop of widespread inflation caused by the war in Ukraine. The government's hoping to show support to those struggling through economic hardship. However, many of the hardest hit still hope for a more impactful gesture.
Gabon's foreign minister has died of a heart attack whilst he was waiting to attend a cabinet meeting. 62-year-old Michael Musa Adamo was sat in a waiting room when he started to feel unwell. Medics on site attempted to revive him, but he was pronounced dead at a military hospital just after midday. Gabon's president, Ali Bongo, said he was a very great diplomat, a true statesman. For me, he was first and foremost a friend, loyal and faithful, whom I could always count on. A Rwandan journalist, one of the few who are critical of Paul Kagame's government, has died. John Williams Entwali was killed in a car crash in Kigali on Wednesday. A police spokesman said the driver of the other vehicle has been arrested and the accident file is being processed for onward transmission to prosecutors. Well, his friends and relatives have called for an independent international investigation into his death. And human rights activists have raised questions about the official narrative. In 2021, our team in Rwanda met with Entwali as part of a report into how YouTube and the internet was changing press freedom. Take a look at an extract from that report.
Chers téléspectateurs de Pax TV, nous vous saluons et aujourd'hui nous sommes avec le Dr. Kamba Christophe. C'est un nouveau politicien.
John Williams Ndwale is a journalist who runs a YouTube channel on which he often broadcasts interviews with controversial figures.
Here in Rwanda, opponents are not well received in the mainstream media. They are not well received at all. When we talk to political opponents or people who want social economic change, often the Rwandan government sees us as an enemy of the state.
John embraces his right to freedom of speech. However, it has not come without cost. In 2014, he was forced to flee Rwanda after releasing a report that authorities did not like.
And finally, Ethiopian Orthodox Christians have been celebrating their Epiphany. The colourful festival known as Timket sees believers commemorate the baptism of Jesus with song, prayer and processions. Lauren Berstecker has more.
Draped in white robes and religious apparel, worshippers converge on Lake Ziwe to celebrate the Orthodox Epiphany. Some even traveled from the capital to attend the colourful ceremony, locally known as Timkat, the largest religious holiday in Ethiopia.
I came here with my family from Addis Ababa because this is a unique celebration which begins and ends on water.
In line with tradition, 6 high Orthodox priests embarked on small boats filled with crosses and religious icons. They were then joined by worshippers who circled the lake while the holy men performed various religious rites. Back on shore, the priests blessed the water of Lake Ziwe before spraying a euphoric crowd with the holy liquid. For many locals, the festival raises hopes of developing tourism in the region, much like in Gondar, the former capital of the Ethiopian Empire, where Timkat celebrations attract thousands of visitors each year.
We used to only have a few people attending the celebration, but now they're coming from all over the country. We're getting closer to the popularity of Gondar, and we still want to improve.
With its unique heritage and cultural traditions, Ethiopia hopes tourism can help redress an economy left in tatters by 2 years of civil war.
That's it from me. Stay tuned to France 24. More news coming up next.
"200 years ago, a unique country was born, Liberia. It was founded to welcome emancipated American slaves, a dream that rapidly turned into a nightmare.
When they came to this place, they used a gun to subdue the native to really surrender the land.
Followed a battle for domination, civil war, corruption, and massacres.
Is the result of not only the war, but the result of social inequities that created conditions for war.
What is the situation today? Our teams went to find out. Watch Liberia Revisited on France 24 and France24.com.